If you're thinking about installing down lighting for your home, stay away from these ancient, outdated cans. They're an absolute pain to install. There is a way better option with these sleek, modern LED lights that are super easy to install, and they even have a nightlight option for some mood lighting. So today, I'm gonna show you guys how to install these from underneath, because like most people, I don't have the attic space to access wiring from above. So we're gonna do everything from down below, and I got a few tips and tricks to help you along the way. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Komar Project. This is the room that we spend most of our time in as a family. And as you can see, there's almost no lighting on the entire ceiling except for two directional can lights over the TV. And that just doesn't provide enough light, especially at night. All right, so we're in our living room right now, and it may seem like it's lit up, like it's pretty good, right? But I do have two key lights right here, and I have two windows that are pumping in a ton of daylight. So we're gonna need to upgrade it with these lights. And the first thing we need to do is figure out how many of them we want and where to put them. And to me, symmetry is a big deal. So I decided I'm gonna go with either 4 or 9. So what I wanna do is actually lay these out on the floor and see what it looks like. Let's do it. All right, so I decided I'm gonna go with 6 lights. 4, I'm just afraid I won't get enough light in this room, and 9 is just crowding the ceiling. So the next thing we need to do is figure out where our joists are, or trusses, depending on what you have, so that we know the exact location on where we want to put them. Now, if you have 1/2-inch drywall, you're gonna have to figure out the location and kind of avoid those joists. However, if your drywall is 5/8, it will go underneath a joist. It will sit directly underneath it, and it will still sit flush on your ceiling. But if you're like me and you have 1/2-inch drywall, your best friend is gonna be a stud finder. All right, now that I know where my joists are and how they're running in my ceiling, I want to establish where my first line of lights is going to be. And for me, that's going to be 62 inches. So I'm going to measure out 62 inches from this wall, and that's going to give me the center of my light. 62, and unfortunately, that hits directly in the center of one of my joists. That's unfortunate. So we're either going to have to shift these lights this way or shift them this way. All right, so which way do we go? I decided to shift them towards the wall by 5 inches, giving me a 57-inch distance from the wall to the center of my light, and then I can mark them with painter's tape. Then I measured 57 inches out from the far side of the ceiling, and with a laser level, I connected the 2 marks, giving me a straight reference line for the first row of lights. Now, the length of my ceiling width-wise is 200 inches. And since I'm gonna be putting in 3 lights, that leaves me 4 open spaces between the lights. So divide that by 4, gives me 50 inches, and that's gonna give me the distance to the center of the light from this wall, and then we can transfer that to all the other lights. Now that we have the location of our lights marked with painter's tape on the ceiling, we can start drilling the holes. This is a 6 3/8-inch recessed can light hole saw that attaches to any drill. It has a pilot drill bit on it that makes centering it easy and makes quick work of drilling that hole. But it does create a whole lot of dust, so if you have somebody with a shop vac catching some of that, it'll make this process much cleaner. And that's why you want somebody with a vacuum, hopefully catching all this stuff instead of getting it all over you. But we got a hole drilled, and now we can do the other 5 and start the wiring. And one thing I did forget to mention that's super critical is make sure you put on a mask, because whether or not you have somebody vacuuming, it's gonna get dusty. With all the holes drilled, I went down into the basement to shut the power off to the entire living room area for safety, because getting zapped is not fun at all. With the power off, I can remove the 2 directional cans over the TV, and with my phone on record, I can get a better idea of what's going on in that ceiling cavity with the existing electrical. All right, so what we got going on here is there's power feeding a junction box, which these 2 cans were getting power from. It's great. It means we can steal power from here because we're going to be eliminating that one completely. It's gone. We're going to drywall over it. But because there's a junction point here, we cannot close this in. We got to leave it open We're gonna put a plate over it, a blank plate that will cover this area up to give us access. There's 2 joists here, which luckily one we can drill through from this opening and the other one from our new light opening. So that means that we're not touching anything in the ceiling. It's great. But to get over to the other set of 3, there are probably 4 or 5 joists in between there that we're gonna have to open up our ceiling. It's unfortunate, but when installing something like this, you may have to do a little bit of drywall work, and I'm gonna show you guys how to fix that too. I used the multi-tool to cut a 6-inch by 34-inch opening in the ceiling drywall, making sure that I don't throw away that piece because we're going to be using it later to patch that hole. But for now, we have access to the joist from below to run the wiring from one row of the lights to the other. The wiring that I'm using is armor-clad wiring. It's the same thing as Romex, except this has a armored sleeve around it. Where we live, we have to do everything in conduit or armor-clad. So whether you're using Romex or this, just make sure you check with your local building codes so that you're in compliance. With the 3/4 inch spade bit, I drilled holes through all the joists that I need to run wiring through. Then I used the hanger from our closet to try to fish it through from hole to hole. For one hole, I bent a loop in the wire and pushed it through the hole and taped it to the joist so it wouldn't fall out. Then from the other opening, I'm going to bend a hook in another piece of wire to try to catch it or hook that loop. It may take a few tries to get it hooked on there, or you can get lucky and just push that wire through that second hole without even needing to use that loop. I got it, guys. But that never happens, not on the first try. All right. So now let's do the easy part, the wiring. Next, I tied a string to the hanger and pulled it through the joist. With clad wiring, it takes some effort because it doesn't want to bend as easily. So that's why I'm using this string. But if you're using Romex, which is way more flexible, you can just tape it straight to the hanger and pull it right through the hole without having to use this string. Once I ran it from my starting point, where I'm going to be connecting the lighting, the junction box, I can then push the wiring through the joist cavity for my first 3 lights, leaving enough wire to connect them like a daisy chain. But once I get to the last light in the row, I need to cross over those joists we opened up earlier to the second row. And this time I enlisted the help of my daughter, who was able to stick her finger in the hole that we drilled and feel for the hanger while I guided it through, making fishing the wire a breeze.
Did I get it? I got it! On the first try! Yeah! Boom! Shakalaka!
Now that we have all the wiring pulled in the ceiling, let's take a moment to thank the sponsor of this build and the maker of these lights, Monite. Monite is dedicated to selling high-quality lights that make your installation a breeze. I will even be installing their LED downlights into some existing can lights that we already have throughout the house to give our space a modern and sleek look. You can find the lights I installed on Amazon, and if you put in the code KOMAR100 at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your entire purchase. Thank you, Monite, for supporting what I do. Now let me show you how I wired them up. These lights come with 2 parts to them, a 6-inch LED light with easy to clip in springs and a pre-wired junction box. The junction box also has a switch to set the color temperature preference from 2700 to 4500 Kelvin. And connecting them couldn't get any easier. Just plug the 2 ends together and tighten the nut to complete the circuit. To connect the electrical to the junction box, I'm going to show you guys at the bench because it's a little bit easier to see it down below, but the connection is absolutely the same in the ceiling. There are 2 knockouts on the box, and I used a screwdriver to push them in and twist. They should just fall right out. Now we have 2 openings. One for power going into the box and one for power going out of the box into the next light junction box, and we want to connect all the colored wires together. But before I can do that, I need to connect this wiring to the junction box, and I'm using a BX connector for the clad wiring. You may have a different connector depending on the type of wire that you're running, but they pretty much do the same thing. They make a connection to the box. After the connector was nice and tight on the wire, I can slip the wires into the junction box and secure them with the slip ring from the connector. So there you go, we got power in, and now we just have to repeat the same process for power going out. Now we have power in and power out of the box. We need to connect the 3 colored wires together to the corresponding colors. I always take the green ground wires first, strip them, twist them together, and put a wire nut on them. Then I do the same thing with all white neutral wires together, and you guessed it, all the black wires together. And finally, just to be sure it all stays connected, I like to wrap each strand with electrical tape and tuck them nicely into the junction box. With all 6 lights now connected together, it's time to give them a power source. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to be stealing power from the old junction box that supplied the directional cans. First, I checked to make sure that all the power was off and cut away all the old connections that I didn't need, leaving only the hot and the neutral wire feeding this box. Because this box was originally connected with conduit, which acts like a ground, it didn't need a ground wire. So to connect the ground that we're running this time, I drilled a hole in the junction box for the grounding screw. Then I can slip in the new wiring into the box and connect the ground to the screw and my neutral and hot wires to the ones that I left behind. So now that we have a power supply to the lights, we need to connect the switch. And luckily for me, I still have that old one from the directional cans. But it does look really old, so we're gonna swap it out for a newer one. After removing the plate, unscrewing the switches, I can pull out the wiring and temporarily turn the power on to find my hot wire. Using a tester, I checked each wire and marked the hot with a piece of tape so I don't get it mixed up. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, make sure you contact a licensed electrician. The switch I have had 4 wires. The green I disconnected because my conduit is acting as a ground. There's also a blue wire, which acts as a traveler wire if you're running a 3-way switch on it. Since I'm not going to be doing that, I put a wire nut on it in case I ever do decide to convert it to a 3-way. Then the black wire on the switch gets connected to the neutral out of the box, and the red wire on the switch is going to get connected to my hot coming out of the box. And like with all my other connections, I make sure that I have plenty of electrical tape on it to hold everything together. And now for the real test. Alright, with all of our lights tested and everything working properly, I can now secure the switches to the box, install a no screw plate, and finally tackle that hole that we left in the ceiling. I didn't forget about it. The old piece of drywall will fit perfectly, but we need to clean up the edges a bit with a utility knife to give the mud a place to sit. I do this on the piece and also on the ceiling. Then I secure it to the joist using 1¼ drywall screws, and I also secure the drywall past the piece that we cut out. Sometimes depending on where you cut it, it can loosen up a bit, and a few extra screws will just ensure that it will never crack in the future. And here's an old school trick when applying mud. Add a little dish soap to it. Yep, just regular dish soap. I like Dawn because it smells nice. But this will make your mud apply much smoother to the surface and just makes it easier to apply in general. I typically do 3 coats of mud, a little sanding, some primer and paint, and you won't even know that that hole was there in the first place. Once the paint dries, I connected all the lights to their junction boxes, pulled back the 2 clips on the sides of the light, placed the light up against the hole, and released the clips. This pulls that light right up against the ceiling, completing this installation. And what a transformation it is. It totally changes the look of the room, and now I can see what I'm doing, where I'm going, and not stubbing my toe onto the coffee table. But honestly, my favorite part of this installation has to be the nightlight option on these lights. You can just dim it super low and just kick back and enjoy your evening in style. Yeah! Oh, and if you happen to forget to set the color temperature on your lights, no worries. They come right out. Make your selection and pop it right back in place. Alright guys, so this installation is done and I love how it turned out. Thank you Monite for supporting what I do. Make sure you guys check out the links in the description below for the lighting that I used, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the bell notification so you don't miss upcoming videos. Thank you so much for joining me on this experience. I'll see you guys next time.